Joining me now, Gemma Tognini from GT Communications and Royal Report host Caroline Di Russo. Ladies, another survey on Aussies' views of Australia Day out today. Less than 20% want the date changed. I mean, these numbers are virtually the same as they've been for the last few years. 9 in 10 people say they're proud to be Australian. Caroline, surely it's debate over. We hear it, we get the same numbers every year, and yet we still talk about it like it's some real issue. Woolies don't want to stock things, Aldi don't want to stock things. Australians simply say, we like Australia Day, let's move on.
And can we just get on with it? Because honestly, I find it so dull having this conversation every year. I think in that poll, the only group which didn't support or didn't have that 50% majority was that 18 to 34 age group, which you can appreciate in a sense. But more broadly, if you look at that 20%, what I'd really be interested in actually, Caleb, is the Venn diagram overlap between that 20% or the people within that 20% who don't want Australia Day but also think the Houthis are freedom fighters. I think that would be really instructive.
Yeah, quite right. And I mean, the thing that gets me, Gemma, and you know, you are both obviously of Italian background, this country has a great migrant story. And it feels like every time we have this debate about, you know, Australia Day and whether or not it should be on January the 26th, they just want to, the lefties, white lefties in particular, want to cast aside all the migrants who've worked so hard to build this country and want to celebrate Australia Day. You know, they must be invaders as well, Gemma.
Well, I mean, families like mine were invaders who paid for the privilege to invade, I suppose, and contributed proudly to building a country. My father and my nonna and my zia all arrived in Fremantle on the 26th of January on a ship called the Australia in 1956, and I love that part of our story. But I think you can take a step sideways, Caleb, and look at this story. The demographic that is least likely to celebrate Australia Day, I would propose, is the demographic that is the most disconnected from the things that actually allow them to express views that, in my view, are mistaken. How many of them would be able to say they understood what happened at Milne Bay? How many of them would say they understood the Sandakan Death March? How many of them would say they understood any of that recent-ish history? I think there is you know, like a fatness, and I use that word metaphorically, of a generation who has been born into privilege. And let's face it, if you're a middle-class Australian born to a family that is a middle-class family here, it's privileged in the sense that you're not going to go hungry, you've had a great education, you probably haven't had to fight too hard for much in life. What are our schools teaching? What is our education system teaching? And all of these institutions that have been hijacked by the extreme of the political left, who don't place a proportionate, respectful amount of focus on these things that are all the fabric of this country. I think that's a really important point in this.
Well, look, yeah, and look no further than the fact that so many people seem to think that Captain Cook was on the First Fleet. I mean, they keep going around vandalising his statue as though he was the one who rocked up. He didn't. Oh, my God, we are so bereft of historical knowledge in this country. But an Australian come good, Tasmanian-born Mary Donaldson, she's now the Queen of Denmark, as has been proclaimed overnight. Caroline, you know, it wasn't quite the coronation of King Charles, but have you been sucked into all the hype here?
Well, of course, I've been sucked into all the hype. I mean, that's the stupidest question you've ever asked, Caleb. And look, to be fair, this was a proclamation which in a sense was more akin to the ceremonies that King Charles went through in the days after his mother passed away, as opposed to the coronation. Also, not very long to prepare, and an absolutely stunning job was done. You can just imagine people working around the clock. The designer who did Mary's dress had 14 days to make that dress. So everything was done, I suppose, in a very short period of time. And in that, you know, beautiful and traditional and elegant, but also in that very pragmatic Scandinavian style that the Danes have, I thought it was an excellent display. What I really loved was just the crowds, the people, the waving of the flag, the thankfulness of the Danish people for their queen who had just abdicated, and the hope for the future. None of the black armband stuff that we had to deal with in relation to the British coronation. It was such a warm and gracious event. I thought it was absolutely stunning.
Well, you've always got to celebrate Aussies taking over the world, I reckon. Just while we're on the monarchy, former Labor Senator Olympian Nova Peris in The Australian today, she said that Australia won't become a republic if there is a no campaign that stands in the way of it. And more or less, there shouldn't be a referendum unless there is bipartisan support for the proposal. She's not wrong, Gemma.
No, I don't think she's wrong at all. I think we know that in general terms, referenda are very difficult to get across the line without a bipartisan approach. But so it's funny that this should come up, her comments should come up, because I found myself reflecting on that last week with the news that Mary Donaldson would become Queen, etc. And I just feel like most Australians look at the system we have and go, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, there is no practical need for Australia to become a republic. It is, I think, respectfully, the ego project of a few sort of vested interest people who, for whatever reason, think Australia should become a republic. You know, more power to them for having that view. But our nation, in case they haven't noticed, is facing significantly greater challenges with significantly greater day-to-day impact on families and businesses, and I just think it's a vanity project of sorts that doesn't have any pragmatic implications for our self-determination going forward.
Of course. I mean, you know, republic sounds great until you consider the fact that we could well end up with President Bandana Man. I'm not even going to mention his name, but we all know who I'm talking about. Gemma Tognini, Caroline Di Russo, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks.